Hello, hello, everybody. Today's going to be a great day. You know why?
Why?
I was like, is she going to remember? Because when you know better, you get better. And that's what we're going to do here today and every day. As a Heal Squad, we will be better together. Welcome to any new listeners. Today, we're going to be chatting with Dr. Neeta Bhushan, who is amazing. You guys are going to love this conversation. She's a former cosmetic dentist turned mental health coach and advocate. And she wrote this really great book, That Sucked. Now what? Which I feel like we all need. Before we get to that, our quote of the day: life's a challenge, but that's the best part. Spoken from a true competitor, Venus Williams. I like that. Heal Squad, very excited to be back with you today. We have a really great chat with Dr. Nita. She has gone through so much in her life, and I know that you will be able to connect with her and her journey. She's had a lot of trauma, and she went on this 45-country healing journey where she researched the intersection of human behavior, ancient wisdom, Eastern philosophy, therapeutic psychology, and of course, coupled that with, her overcoming multiple massive adversities. She has come out the other side and is helping people come out the other side with her. So really excited for you guys to hear this conversation and take some of her wisdom and tips and apply it into your life. Before we get to that, have you checked out our merch, friends? Oh, wait, this is my old mug.
No.
I have the old mug, but we now have Heal Squad mugs. You can get a new one. You can get a Heal Squad mug. But we have all of our Heal Squad merch on Menounos.com. Join us. Wear it loud and proud. Let everyone know you're a part of the squad, but also remind yourself when you're having your tea, not with Better Together, but with Heal Squad. Remind yourself when you're having your tea or your coffee that you're on this journey to getting better in all areas of life. And it's baby steps, friends. Not going to be doing it all overnight. It takes a long time. So check that out. Obviously, also, we are grateful to Macy's for being on board with us in 2023. So thank you to them because they help us keep the lights on and keep bringing this amazing content to you. So if you could support us by checking out Macy's.com/Heal Squad, our curated page. I choose everything myself. And so I've said it before, but if you're on a new health journey, fitness journey, I do have some fitness wear on there that might help inspire you if you need new things. And I've been cleaning out some of my old gear as well and replacing it with new stuff that is going to make me feel better. You kind of need every advantage you can get. So check that out when you get a chance. Anything you buy on that link helps us on the show keep doing what we're doing. And I guess without further ado, let's go to Dr. Nita. You have a really cool story. And in fact, Kelsey and I were chatting this morning, how everyone always talks about your biggest challenge or, your worst life circumstances, whatever it is. Usually, if you can, keep a cool head, will lead you to the pot of gold or the rainbow or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you had that kind of story. And so I'd love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your journey and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, wow. I can definitely start at the, my biggest awakening. We can go there and then work backwards. But, as it's interesting, as we kind of start the new year, for me, it's always a time of renewal, and it's always a time for looking back into the seasons, because at the end of December, it's usually this culmination time of me going back into what sucked. And that was the beginning of my awakening. And it was December 31st in 2011 when I decided to leave my marriage. And I had this full just breakdown moment of recognizing that I was living in fear. I was living for the sake of my family. And I had grown up in Chicago And so my parents were immigrants. My dad was from India. My mom was from the Philippines. And they always taught us that, education and exceeding accolades, achievement, doing well was the pinnacle of success. And here I am on my knees in this amazing home that I had worked so hard to get. I was a cosmetic dentist at the time. I wasn't even 30. So all of these amazing material things that a lot of us really strive for, especially in our 20s. And I had done all of that. And yet here I am looking at the mirror thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't even know who I am anymore. And how did I even get here? And so for me to even say, okay, and acknowledge, wow, I'm hurting and I'm reeling in a ton of pain right now. And to say, okay, here, universe, take me as I am. I don't even know. But literally, when we start to share or say out loud what the things that we're kind of keeping in our heart or keeping in our head or keeping under wraps because we're afraid of being judged or we're afraid that, someone's going to talk bad about us or whatnot. For me, that was the beginning of this full transformation because I would then recognize that there were a lot of things that were not healed. There were a lot of things that I was keeping up in the back closet for decades. And that includes my losses that I went through. I lost my mom, my dad, and my brother all before I was 19. And
how?
Yeah, so my journey actually, I was a child caretaker at 10, and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 10 years old. And so between the ages of 10 and 16, we saw her in and out of hospitals. I literally grew up going to my high school, which was Lane Tech, shout out Chicago. But then I would come home and I would actually not come home. I would go to Thoric Hospital, which was where she was because it was on the way home. But it was doing my homework while she was getting treatment. And at this point, when I was 14 years old, it was pretty bad. It had spread to her lungs, it had spread to her brain. And so, doctors really were hopeful. But for the last year and a half of her life, she was actually in the ICU. So that's when I started my high school, that rebellious teenager. And just to have this feeling waking up every morning of like, everyone has their mom and like, I'm going to take care of her. I didn't know how that was. I didn't really know that it was going to inform me in such a big way later on. And so
because you're at the age where you're supposed to be taken care of.
Yeah. And, you want that closeness because my dad was actually a very strict Indian Punjabi dad. And I wasn't really connecting with him at that season and stage of my life. And all I wanted to do was talk to my mom and she had a tube down her throat and you could see the tears coming down her face. Cause I just remember it so vividly. We would come back and I was in piano and all of these things. My brothers were younger. My brother was, when I was 16 or even 14 at the time, he was 12. And then my youngest brother was 9. So we would go and we would perform for the nurses. It was very performative. And that's kind of when I learned how to put smiles on her face because she was in such a dire state. And so for me, it was, okay, the performing gave rise to, all right, maybe that'll alleviate her suck in her situation a little bit more. And it, of course, the Filipino nurses there, and my mom's Filipino, they loved it all. And so fast forward then, when my mom dies at 16, we're trying to rebuild our lives. And literally a year later, my brother, he went to high school across the street from me and he was 15. He was a sophomore and he had an asthma attack and he apparently his inhaler, we don't really know to this day what the specifics was, but his inhaler didn't work that day and he transitioned. And it was very quick. It was fast. They couldn't revive him. They tried 3 times in the ambulance. And so that was probably one of the toughest days of my life to date. It really informed so much of sudden death and grief, because it's very different than losing a parent to
Totally.
cancer, right?
Yep. You have time. You grieve them before they're even gone. I lost my mom too to brain cancer last year. And so it's the same thing. You grieve them. My husband would catch me so often and say, Maria, you're already grieving her before she's gone. And so, yeah, it's a totally different thing.
It's so different in that sort of grief of sudden death of like, wait, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And so
I lost my cousin to a car crash when I was 15. He was 18. So I know that feeling of you were just talking to them and now they're just gone and they're young and nobody would expect it.
Oh gosh. And that that set me off on a cascade of, I just want to fit in. I don't want anybody to talk about, anything besides joy and fun, because my orbit at the time was so dark. And so I remember just, being a senior in high school, couldn't leave for college, had to be and stay put. And my dad went to this deep depression. I had to stay and kind of, resume duties of the house. And I had a younger brother who was 5 years younger, and it actually happened on his 12th birthday. Talk about a shit ton of trauma.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. And so 2 years after that, my father would be diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And that was when I'm like, God, are you kidding me? I was raised Catholic. My mom was Catholic. My dad was very spiritual. I mean, being from India, we grew up going to the temple. We also grew up chanting bhajans and mantras, and that was really a stronghold for us during this like huge, immense wave of a ton of grief. But even then, my dad had no words, and he was like, he's like, I believe this diagnosis. So for actually the first few months, because he was at the healthiest time of his life, like he had quit smoking, he was jogging. I mean, he was dating, this was when AOL was a thing, but like he was in the chat rooms doing his thing, and it was bringing joy back into our lives. And for this to be that sucky moment again, taking us way into the spiral, we're like, okay.
I have a feeling that your brother and your dad were so connected that think about it, the asthma is in the lungs.
Yeah.
And I think your dad never recovered. Obviously, how could he? No parent that loses their kid recovers. I think that's what manifested in his lungs.
Oh, it's so true. The immense grief that you're probably carrying as a parent. And, we have so much now that we can, which is why, of course, it's informed what I do so much in emotional advocacy. But back then, especially as a immigrant dad who lost his wife, where you're only accepted in society if you have your wife there. And so while he was progressive, I mean, there were just no words to talk about or even sit with a tragedy of like losing a wife and then a son, and then now you're diagnosed with this. And so there was, and to actually add on, because, this is the Heal Squad, people had mentioned that my brother was very close to my mom because it happened a year after. And that they were just angels that wanted to,
be together.
And that, has given me so much solace and peace and knowing. And, fast forward to even some of the healing that I've dove into, of course, after my pivotal moment of my tumultuous divorce and marriage, was really through psychedelics and really some of these plant healing journeys where I was able to reconnect with my mom, my dad, my brother, and not just one time, but many times, which informed me to actually leave my lucrative career as a cosmetic dentist, and understanding that that they've always been, championing me on and cheering me on to the next stage of whatever that was for me. Because, before I was 20, I lost all three immediate members of my family. And so a lot of times, if you're already just going through the woes of, all right, what am I going to do with my life? But then again, you've lost the closest people to you. I mean, I hadn't really put to words what that looked like until just recently, until I actually got into motherhood and, finding love again with my new love partner, because I saw the contrast, because there's a direct contrast of, oh, wow, I don't think I've ever experienced this kind of joy in my life, even through the hardships of moving from LA to Austin, even through the hardships of, having so much anxiety around being a new mom because I didn't have my mom, and all of that grief and just the pressure of wanting to do things a certain way because you feel bad because your mom couldn't do it that way. And so all of that I was energetically dealing with, but I'm like, oh wait, this isn't as nearly as bad as the stuff that I went through in my teens and my early 20s. And to celebrate the contrast of the beauty in that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel very connected in the closest way I can. Obviously, I didn't have that happen, but losing my mom, it's the worst.
Yeah.
But I can't believe that there's so much joy in my life now, a year and a half later. And sometimes I walk around and I'm like, I think people mourn their mom for way longer and they suffer for such a long time. So then I'm like, should I be suffering or should I be, but I think that if my theory is like, I mourned her properly, I really gave it the time. And I sat in all those feelings when it first happened. And I feel that same joy right now where I'm just like, I am so grateful that there is life after, but you don't ever think there will be.
No. And I'm so glad you're bringing that up because I know that it's still so new though. Like you just lost her last year and it's so new. And, people even ask me when they've lost a parent, even a sibling. And by the way, I never wanted to be known as like this grief person expert. Somebody was like, you'd probably get the EGOT if you were the EGOT of like grief or something, trauma Olympics. But I, just recalling even my brother, who was a big jokester. And for so many years after his death, I thought, okay, we shouldn't be celebrating. We shouldn't because, oh my gosh, he died on this day. And so and he died on my youngest brother's birthday. And so for years, it was so ambiguous for me because I'm like, we want to honor him, but then, and so until I got to the realization while I was older of course we should celebrate you, like my brother Vinay, like, of course we're going to honor DJ as well. And why should we stop living our life? Like he was the jokester of the family. Like let's infuse his energy and his presence here. But because there is all of this idea of the way to grieve and the way to like that we should just lock ourselves up in a, I don't know, in a closet and lock up all of those feelings or it should be so stoic that I didn't really understand how and I don't know if you felt this, but the guilt of even just having fun.
Yeah.
And until, later on I learned, well, actually, yeah, of course mom would want us to have fun. Like we need to be living our lives. Like we're not going to be grieving all the time. And that's why, I wrote the book, like That Sucked Now, like how to embrace the joy and chaos and find magic in the mess. Because if I look back in my teen years, I recall a time when I was like, I was just getting off of the bus, getting into the hospital, but there was like a cute guy as a barista, the hospital cafeteria that was giving coffee and tea, and I would take it upstairs for the nurses and to sit. But I'm like, oh my gosh, oh wait, did he just look at me? Like there's that sliver of joy that would spark aliveness in myself even while I was mourning. And to count some of those, especially for people right now listening or watching, that is like in the suck, there can be those slivers of joy that just pull you back to your humanity, to feel all the feels, and they're totally valid and they're totally okay.
But also, like, I think as I look back, because I was my mom's caretaker for 5 years, and I kind of stepped away from most everything and gave her all of my time. There were a few little things I would run out to do, but I gave her everything I had. And there were moments where I'm like, am I throwing my life away? And instantly the download would come, no, you're exactly where you need to be. And so did I ever think in my life that I would be leaving like entertainment news and go on these brain tumor journeys with myself and my mom and then be finding my way through health and this show and finding my way to my purpose, which my purpose was always to help people. I always wanted to help people. And my books and everything I did was always about helping people. So aside from what I did in the regular kind of career world, that was always a through line. Yeah. And all of those painful steps took me to where I was supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And so, I actually now know when bad things happen, when that sucked, I'm like, oh, okay, this is leading me to something else. It's a pivot point. So God's pivoting me right now. And yeah, it's going to hurt, right? If you're thinking you're going this way and now you got to contort your body and go over here. Okay, it's going to kind of hurt. But where am I going? I wonder where I'm going. I wonder what's coming. I wonder why this is happening. And through the tears, through the pain and, how can I handle any more? Why is this happening? We think all those things. But then I go into kind of like research mode and analyzing mode. Like, okay, what could it be? What could it be? And then sometimes the answer comes and you're able to then lean into it. So I feel like for you, this was all just a setup for the Dr. Nita that is today, that is able to be so empathetic and so helpful to people on their painful journeys. And that's why shit has to happen to you, and a lot of shit.
a lot of shit. Yeah. To actually, help others find the magic in their mess. And, it's interesting. It's kind of this life curriculum now that I talk about in one of the frameworks, and the things that I've been sharing more and more is, what happens after the suck? Because there's one thing where, okay, you have a sucky moment. And by the way, it may not be, we're talking about death and grief and losing our parents right now, but it could be a breakup. It could be getting slighted by a really good friend that you thought was going to be like your ride or die. And like, what just happened?
I've had that happen recently.
Oh my gosh.
You're like, oh, but you know what? Here's the cool thing. I will say when you've had a lot of shit happen, the hits get easier. You can't even knock me off my feet anymore. Now it's like, I just take the hit from Tyson. I'm like, yeah, what else do you got? Like so you get the resiliency, which we'll talk about, the bounce back factor and all of that. But but yeah, it's like that just happened to me too.
Well, I mean, and that's the whole thing of like allowing us to play, to bounce, because with those hits, and I'm sure the best analogy that I could talk about with this is dating, right? Because we've all had bad breakups. We've all had bad partners. Some of us might still be in a season of that. And where we're thinking, oh, okay, well, well, here we go again, right? And I picked another person who am I ever going to find love again? And I think that it just makes us a little bit more resilient when we can actually look at ourselves and say, well, all right, that sucked. Now what? And using that as a mantra and using that as, because even in my darkest days, I would literally say, well, okay, that sucked. Now what? That sucked. Now what? Kind of like what you were saying. All right, what do you got? Throw another one at me. What you got?
Well, also, don't you believe, or do you believe that if these patterns are continuous, it's the universe trying to teach you some lesson? So if you're in another bad relationship, it's like I've been taught by so many different gurus, like thank that person that sucks so bad in your life because they're taking on the role in this lifetime of that kind of evil figure to teach you something, to help you. And if you can find your way through that, like for me, I had a really rough relationship with my brother. And I had to get to the place where I acknowledged he's here to teach me something. And ultimately, I forgave him. And we've had peace for this last year or so. And I'm like, okay, this feels really good. And I'm really grateful for it. But, there are lessons that they're there to teach you. So if you are in a really bad relationship with your husband, maybe you're supposed to find your power and you haven't found it yet. And you're just going to stay and it's going to get worse and worse and worse for a reason because you have to rise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's literally a chapter in the book. It's rising. And that's stage 2 of, when you fly forward in order to get out of the suck, because absolutely we're all mirrors to each other at the end of the day. And I think that many times, even after my tumultuous relationship, I was celibate for a year and a half. I was like, nope, no guys, until, I did the whole, I traveled to Bali, and it was a very healing time for me. And I went across the world, actually, to 45 different countries. It was just like I was on a mission. And I was on a mission to heal. I was on a mission to sit with different elders and different communities. And I was just on the self-healing journey. Yet for me, it was every single person that I would meet on this journey had such a profound, it could have been profound, but it could have been even, a single mom on the street in Ecuador, right? And so they're there to share and show us their wisdom. It's up to us if we're ready to actually receive it. Otherwise, the same lessons are going to be popping over, and it could be that person that you met at Starbucks that slighted you or cut you off in line, or that next person is like the person that you're sitting next to at a bus stop, or that you're actually working for, that's not really giving you the respect or the dignity that you deserve, but you're constantly knowing that, oh, okay, there's that, what's the universe, like, where is my role in this? And I talk a lot about the personal responsibility that we many times shy away from when we're in the healing journey, because sometimes we get stuck in the suck and we get stuck in this, the victim mentality. Mm-hmm. And I was definitely there. I don't know if, we were just sharing of like, okay, why me? Why is this happening? Especially when we're going through grief and death and, just bad circumstances happening or friends betraying us. But then maybe we can reframe it to, all right, why not me? Like, what is this showing me where it's encouraging me to leap to a different version of myself? And that's where, if we can turn that perspective, that's, I think, where the magic comes in. And that's where we can start to, rise out of the suck or the fall that we've had. And the fall can look like literally a ski accident, a car accident, any sort of, accident that we have, or even a breakup, a transition, a life quest into where we can actually magnify. And when we're magnifying, we're finding our new feet on the ground. We're knowing and accepting our reality, where our reality is in the moment. It's present. We're not thinking too far along the future, but we're actually saying, okay, here's where I'm at. It kind of sucks. I still feel kind of reserved. I don't feel like I could trust that person. but I'm curious. I'm curious because I want to learn and I want to be better. And it's focused on the curiosity of, okay, what else can I learn instead of, this person's out to get me. I don't think that's going to work out. Oop, red flag right there. So we're leaning into this idea of, okay, curiosity, tell me more. What else could this mean?
So will you explain to everyone the mirror effect?
Oh, yes. So, I feel like you and I are mirrors right now, too. I could just use that as an example because right now you're, in the way that you're even sharing how you're talking about your mom, it's reflecting back in me of, oh, yeah, I remember that first year out of my grief. And I remember that first year out of wow, okay. Yeah, there were moments where I would just break down, right? And just have my days of heaviness. But who we are and who we encounter, we're perhaps many times meant to, I like to say, collide, because if we're colliding in each other's orbits, there's something for us to learn from that other person and the wisdom that they're sharing or the perspective that they're sharing, if we're actually open, right? We could be meeting on the street and talking about our fun sweaters and where we're going next for travel, and that could be it. But again, what wisdom is it that we're sharing? And if we're open, even if it's not even a harmonious connection, what is it there that's meant for us to learn? And I always kind of say, we can put our Sherlock Holmes hat on and our magnifying glass on, because there is maybe that small sliver that is just meant for us, a little wisdom nugget in everyone that we meet. And that's kind of, my idea around this is if I accidentally bump into somebody at the airport or wherever, walking to a coffee shop or something, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I think I'm meant to connect with that person. I meant to share, or I meant to say something to that person, right? It's not really coincidence anymore. And I don't know if you've felt the same way, but that
Always.
is the mirror effect, where I'm like, oh, okay. Or something, I was scrolling on my feed and something pops up and just it takes me in. That is that mirror effect, because energetically or intuitively, we're knowing that, all right, there's something there. And many times now I'll just write a DM, or I'll stop and I'll ask the person a question instead of just brushing it off, because there's so many times in our day where we're just so in our head, trying to get to the next destination, trying to do the extra thing, trying to do all of these things. But if there's that reason why we bumped in the first place, so get to know that person, and you might find that there is that magic there and something for you to kind of just gain from that wisdom that's being shared.
That's so cool. Yeah, I have those moments so often where I'll be with somebody and I'll just say what I'm feeling, and then the floodgates open and it was something that they were meant to hear, and they're like, oh my God, this was meant to be. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it was, because I normally wouldn't say this out loud, and something told me to say it out loud right now. And so
it's so true. And I think a lot of times, as we are sharing our vulnerabilities, it just brings even deeper connection, even in that, spring of a moment. And yeah, that's what I love so much about just the shared vulnerability. And many times, if we're keeping things on the surface, we're never going to get to that other person's now what moment, or we're never going to get to that person's their magical moment that sucked, because many times it is often, the things that we're not sharing or sharing that then is wait a minute, that actually happened to me too, or I'm actually going through that same thing as well.
So will you talk a little bit about the bounce factor? Because you have 4 steps or components to it. And I really like how you talk about resiliency.
Yeah. So, and I'll just start with resiliency as, when I was, and I'll just tell a quick story, but when I was growing up, I was taught to that resiliency was tough, and it meant toughness, and it meant, having so much strength, because of course, how can you reconcile all of the grieving and the death that's going around you, and the massive losses that's going around you? And so the elders and the caretakers around me would say, Nita, you're tough. So be tough. You're resilient. So I grew up keeping all of my feelings in the back closet, keeping up all of my feelings away, because I'm like, okay, I have to be tough. And so I was told, okay, big girls don't cry. And so it is not uncommon for someone like that to then say, okay, they're going to hide all of their emotions and lock them somewhere, shove them under a rug, suppress them, and, keep it tight, because the only emotion that is allowed is joy or fun or play. And until I couldn't no longer hide it anymore, that it had no place to go. It was like bursting at the seams, and I needed to actually ask for help. And so one of the ways that I define resiliency is the audacity for you to actually break down, ask for help, and actually allow somebody else to be in your orbit to support you. And it's the intentionality that we are, and that we can sit in with the darkness, but we can also find the slivers of joy and chaos at the same time. And those can all coexist all at the same time. So the chaos, the anxiety, the overwhelm, but the slivers of fun and excitement and curiosity that are also there. And when I talk about the bounce factor, it's really this metaphor and curriculum for life after sucky moments, because we have to take into account our upbringing. And the first aspect of it is our upbringing, because many of us, and even, in your friendships, in your relationships, and folks that you will encounter, even, in our mirror effects when we go out in the world, or even on social, many times we're not asking about, okay, what was their upbringing like? We're usually it's a snap judgment that we have if somebody rubbed us the wrong way, but maybe even take into account our own lives, right? So for myself, born and raised with immigrant parents, I think a lot of people have that, where maybe there were gender roles that were assumed that girls were supposed to do this. Or in my case, little girls, strong girls don't cry. And so what were we told when we were young? So that is really our upbringing. And were we encouraged? Did we have helicopter parents? Did we have, tiger parents like my parents? And so that informs how we actually deal with stress, how we deal with bouncing back after tough moments. And the second aspect of that is leaning into our current environment. What are we surrounding ourselves with? A really quick story: when I had lost my dad, and the whole slew of tragedy, I just told everyone I was leaving. I applied to a study abroad program in Rome, and I begged my very hesitant and restrictive family members, my aunt, my grandmother, to let me go, because I said, okay, this is for school, and it's to get into dental school. And so I actually got accepted, but it was the first time I would leave my little bubble of Chicago. I would leave that darkness. I would leave my home, and I would be away from my family, and, just that tension of grief for as early as I knew, because this whole journey started for me when I was 10 years old. And so I remember being 20 years old, stepping foot into amazing, beautiful Rome, Italy, as a college student. And I'm like, oh my God, I just felt so much liberation. But I got out of my current environment. I got out of, and it doesn't mean that everyone should go to Italy. I mean, you should, but if you can, I mean, go down the street, like grab a new perspective, try something different. And I kind of, my mantra is like, let's suck at something new. But if we're only saying yes to that when we're getting out of our complacency, when we're getting out of the stuck to take action. And that sometimes and many times is increasing our dopamine, and it's evoking a different way in our creativity, taking a stand-up comedy class. I mean, I remember that was one of the things I initially did, that and improv, while I was reeling from my divorce and had zero confidence in myself. That definitely put me on the edge, because I'm like, I don't know how to react. And people are just going to say yes and play with me this way. Oh, great. So I don't have to be perfect. So that is your current environment. But then the third and the fourth aspects we've talked about a lot, which is your emotional capacity to feel. And even how we started out, this conversation, we both shared. And just when you were sharing your grief, it just like, okay, it like allowed me to also express as well that this is a safe place. And I think find those people who allow you to stretch with your emotions, your ability to let it all out, and they're not going to judge you, and they're not going to, it's all going to be welcome, because all of it is all beautiful and it adds to the depth. And can we get into that juicy depth of our relationships to expand ourselves? And then finally, this radical self-awareness. So the fourth part is your radical self-awareness to actually allow you to make judgments and make decisions based off of what's in alignment for me right now? And are these friendships actually adding value to me? Or do I have to find a new, support
a new squad?
Yeah, a new squad, a new posse that's actually going to support you in your healing journey, in what you're actually looking for, and to feel nourished and to feel seen. But that comes with your alignment with yourself. Because I don't know about you, but I remember going through, some of these really dark times, and you kind of see who your friends are, right? Like who actually are there for you, who actually are like, no agenda, no transaction. Hey, love, I just want to sit with you because I know you're going through a really tough time. I mean, as a kid going through this, all I wanted to do was have, fun and actually forget about all of that trauma, because I wanted to fit in as a teenager. And let's be honest, teens don't really know how to grapple with like grief. We don't have the tools when we're younger. And so it was such an awkward conversation. But like fast forward to years and decades later, where we're like, hey, I am going through a funky time, then you can actually see, well, who's there to support you and really meet you and see you for who you really are, and not as just a friend for fun, but that can actually sit with you in the suck too.
That's the thing that's interesting. I'll tell you, I had my ride or dies kind of disappoint me at times. Like they were amazing at some things, but then like there were other people who were like, let me just come sit with you. And I'm like, wow, like that's exactly what I need. And my other friends aren't giving me that. And so what I did, and whether this is right or wrong, is I said, I don't think they know how to do that. Like they're not those kind of people. So I had to kind of forgive it. And say, okay, that's not really what they give, right? Like, that there are people who have different ways they show their love, right? We've got that whole prototype figured out at this point. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting when you are a strong person. That's the other thing I heard is, well, nobody knows how to show up for you because you never need anybody to show up for you.
That's big. And that's huge. And I think that lies in the beauty of the vulnerable ask of like, also, we're talking about different kinds of friends meeting us with our different needs for sure. But then also our responsibility to say, you know what, you need a friend right now that could just sit with me and cry with me, or just see me, witness me. And many times if we're so used to doing all and being there for other people, then it is hard for us to actually even ask for that support, and ask people to support us in the way that we could feel supported. I think that's the other thing is, you know, we don't really practice that. And, many times it's kind of like awkward or very vulnerable if you've never really done it. But I wonder if, everyone listening could actually incorporate that in their life and see what happens when we actually have a courageous conversation and just say, actually, I know I'm always there for you and I'm always the one like bringing everybody together. But right now I just need to be like, I need a cry session.
Yeah.
I need to be supported right now too.
Yeah. Can they hold that space? And some people can't. I've watched people that are really amazing in some ways in my life and then, very disconnected as, in the kind of empathy role. And so, and I'm like, oh, that's the work that they need to do on themselves, right? It is an interesting thing. It's challenging to deal with no matter what.
It is. And I love that we're talking about the ways that we can dive in with our friendships, because, many times, yes, by asking and by sharing, we get to see the kind of friend bucket that they're in. And we get to see like, okay, this person just is there as like uh, my going out having fun and going to nice restaurants kind of friend. But maybe there is that friend that I actually didn't think of in that way, but they're showing up for me in a whole new way. And maybe we get to deepen a bond with and a connection with someone that we perhaps didn't even, think that would go in that direction or be empathetic or be compassionate or hold space for us in that way. And they actually do. And then you forge a new friendship or a deeper relationship and bond that way. So I think that even in that vulnerable ask, this is actually, as we fly forward, one of the things I talk about in the book is to allow yourself to be seen, allow yourself to break down, allow yourself to, and know that we have to have really good compassion for ourselves, because many times if we're not having that compassion with ourselves and we allow ourselves to break down in front of other people, and then they can't meet us, then we think we're a failure or we think something's wrong with us, instead of keeping that intention and commitment back to ourselves of like, nope, my people are there. My squad is there. My heal squad is around. I'm just going to choose certain people to do certain things with. And that's totally cool. I mean, we're not talking about like 10 people. It's like many times, especially when you're going through a healing journey, many times it's like one or two solids and you're good.
Yeah. It's definitely, I had a lot of challenging feelings to deal with through, especially even the last 6 months of my mom's life. And then I had to start forgiving people and realizing that they just aren't capable. They did what they could. And it's my fault for having any kind of expectation. After brain surgery, I made this little mouse pad. And I remember I was like, okay, no temper expectations is right here.
Oh, I love that.
I forgot that. But you mentioned earlier finding the magic in your mess. So I want you to go through that with everybody.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I kind of alluded to it a little bit before. And many times we won't even recognize, the mess that we're in until we had a fall. And so, the first step is, okay, what was your fall? What was the fall that happened? And step two is where and what does it ignite in you? Because step two is that ignition. Are you going to stay in that relationship? Are you going to leave? Are you going to stay in that job that you hate, or are you going to leave? Is this going to be the year? Are you going to actually finally go and sign up for therapy, breath work, that coach? Or are you going to just sit in the suck? So most of us, when we're actually saying yes to this healing journey and finding our magic through our mess, there is that ignition point. And once we are ignited, well, we make that decision. And most of us just continue to sit in our suck. But a good portion of us get into the beauty of rising. And rising is step three. And step three in rising means that, ooh, okay, I'm standing up again. I am standing up and it's kind of wobbly. It's weird. But I'm actually committing to sucking. I'm committing to charting new waters and accepting my new reality that I don't know everything, that this is a healing journey, and that I'm focused on whatever that is because I'm leaning through a lens of curiosity, not perfection. Curiosity and bravery is going to be this next chapter for me. So it means that I might be reserved in conversation with other people or in new healing squads or new communities, but I'm also curious. I might be nervous at sharing my story, but I'm also excited. And so again, inviting the duality of how all of those emotions and feelings can live at the same time. And then we get into magnifying. That's step four. Step four is magnifying because we're actually leaning into the suck. We're starting new ventures. We're trying out new things because we've accepted where we're at and we can't really lose anything. And when we're magnifying, we're actually recognizing that our story was always meant for us. Like that thing didn't happen to us, right? It was always for us. That person that wronged us, they were just telling us a little bit more of how we need to be gentle with ourselves or compassionate with ourselves or love ourselves in a different way or speak our truth. And so when we're magnifying, we're building this newfound confidence in who we are actually becoming. And step five, when we get to thriving just means that, okay, you are really unapologetic in the way you walk in the world. You are setting boundaries that really serve you. And you're not really leaning into what has worked before. And when you actually do have another fall, you're laughing it off. You're able to make fun of yourself. You're able to brush it off and actually say, all right, well, that sucked. Now what? And also it's not even about you anymore. It's about other people. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe you sign up to do, a missions trip or get with a bunch of girlfriends and go clean up the beach on a Sunday. You start new things. You start that podcast. You start posting on a different channel that you've always wanted to. You start writing that book, but you're trying out new things without this expectation that it needs to go a certain way. And it's because it's part of your healing journey and you want to help other people at the end of it. So that's thriving and really finding that magic through all of the tiny little messy steps along the way.
It's a really nice way to crawl out, I feel like. Right? Good steps to kind of crawl out of victim, because it's really hard not to be in victim. I was saying to someone yesterday, you stay in it because you keep having the conversation multiple times with multiple people. You have to keep every time it's like, oh, let me tell this person, I got to tell them my story. And so you live in it. Kelsey, I want to go to you because you had a really great question this morning, and I want you to ask Dr. Nita so that anybody who's listening who might be feeling the same way can get a good answer.
Yeah, I just feel like, and Marie, you kind of addressed it, at the beginning, but it's like, we hear this message a lot, right? Where it's like, you got to break down to have the breakthrough. And I feel like something for me, and I know, hopefully I'm speaking for our audience when I say this, is like, when I am in that dark place, like that stuck place, it's almost impossible for me to get out. Like, I don't know what like actual tangible steps like to take or do when I'm in that like stuck place. And I would love, Dr. Nita, for you to kind of address that, like even like the something little I can like do to be like, okay, I'm down, I'm dark. Like what can I do to get like out of that stuck, you
Did the
know?
steps she give you just now, did any of that resonate for you?
Yes, but I still feel like sometimes it's hard. I need to like put it into my own life, into practice. Like for me, hearing things, I'm like, okay, but I don't know what it is about like having to maybe, I don't know, go home and like try it next time I'm doing that. Cause like it does resonate. It absolutely does. But until you like maybe try and put it into practice, I'm not sure if it's going to work. I don't know if that
Like
makes
to
sense.
me, I would rip out that page in the book and just keep it on the fridge. So every time
Yeah.
something happens, I know I have to go to that
Remember.
checklist.
Well, yeah, you know, and I love that we're bringing this up because there is an emotional release practice that I have in the book that I think is, to your point, Kelsey, probably what we're talking about. Because when we're activated or when we're triggered and we go into the spiral mode, we go into victim mode and we're like, oh gosh, that thing happened, or I totally bombed that presentation, or, okay, why is that same thing happening again to me? And we go into this victim spiral. And what I like to call it in the book is like that pity party for one, where it is our party. We do some retail shopping and we kind of, we sulk our miseries and we probably shouldn't have bought that anyways. And instead, what if we just take a moment because we're constantly all about like, how do we get out of it? But what if we actually allowed ourselves to embrace the suck and actually feel like, what does that actually feel? Because many times, if we're conscious about the feeling that's coming up, whether it's, all right, okay, I'm feeling jealous right now, or I'm actually tuning in the aspect of the bounce factor, the awareness. Okay, I am feeling really scared right now, or I'm feeling really nervous. Well, where am I actually feeling that in my body? And many times, if we stop and instead of judging our feeling, like, okay, I shouldn't be feeling this way, allow yourself to feel it. Get into the suck. Embrace the suck. And I actually even have a whole page of, the first step is to allow yourself, close your eyes. And what I like to do is put my hand over my heart. You can put your hand over your heart. And for me, it is a physical response. It calms my nervous system. So it calms your nervous system when you actually have a physical element to remind yourself to breathe, because guess what? We're human and these things are going to happen. We are going to spiral. It might happen later on today. It might happen tomorrow. It might happen on the drive home. But when you put your hand over your heart and you're catching yourself and you're reminding yourself and you're noticing, ooh, how am I breathing right now? Is my breath shallow? Am I breathing at all? Oh, okay. So that can be your physical representation of like, hey, slow down. You got this. Nothing bad is going to happen. And if it is, all right, we got this. So you're actually telling your brain and your body, you're doing the whole mind-body connection of, all right, let's slow down, let's breathe, and take a deep breath in so we can breathe. And just allow whatever is happening to happen. Where are we feeling the energetics? Where are we feeling the stuckness? Maybe it's in our lower back. For me, usually when I'm in my head a lot, I start to feel it. Like I start to feel the tension headaches on my temples. And so I notice that. All right, well, how can I draw back that energy back to myself? And I'll do 3 rounds of embracing. And it's just like embrace the suck. So we're just, and on the exhale, you're counting out 3 times. Okay. And I have it all listed in the book, but what that allows us to do is it allows us to calm our nervous system. It allows us to bring back into our sense of our body, because most of the time we're thinking about what didn't go well. We're thinking about how we effed up again. We're thinking about how, oh, that shouldn't have happened, but it did. And that's okay. So let's bring it back into the body and feel it. And then let's start to release it. So for me, I'll put on a ridiculous song. And for folks who have been following me for a while, I have this like crazy, ridiculous playlist of different kinds of songs. And because my kids are little, and if you don't have kids, that's totally fine. It's literally called Dinosaur Dance by Cats in Boots. And I'm sure I will get another playlist of ridiculous songs that are for adults. But if you don't have kids, that's why it's even better, because then we won't judge ourselves. We won't have, this perfection in our brains that like, oh, I have to do this thing right now, and it's another thing that I have to do. But put on a ridiculous song. Literally, it goes, dance with me, dinosaur dance, and like literally dance like a T-Rex, flap like a pterodactyl. And you're like, what the heck is she saying? And that's the point. It's ridiculous. And so it gets you out of the funk, because guess what? The next 2 minutes, what are you going to do? I want you to flap your arms like a pterodactyl. I want you to actually stand up and stomp around. And when we're actually standing up and we're stomping or jumping or shamanically shaking, whatever floats your boat, to this ridiculous song that I'm going to have you play. And Maria Kelsey, just add it to the show notes, because it's funny. But it allows us to actually not take ourselves in the situation so seriously, that we actually can stomp out and change our energy, because we're getting up, we're moving, we're shifting, and maybe we're shaking along the way. And then we come back and we integrate and breathe. And we do another round of 3 breaths where we're exhaling longer on the output, because that also calms us down and it integrates. All right, what the heck did I just do? And what did she just tell me to do? And then that way we can reset. It's just a reset, and it's a quick reset. We could do it I've had people do it on stages for 2 minutes. I've had people do it for 30 seconds. You can do whatever, choose your own adventure kind of a thing. But I know that that's been a fun way to immediately get out of the stuck.
I like that. I danced to Paddington Bear 2's shake, 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 Senora, shake your body. I do it all the time. It makes me so happy. And it's a little cartoon movie that just makes me so happy.
That's a good one, actually.
It's a really good one. Yeah, you can add that to your playlist.
It's good too, because it's like, I think we often forget. I know for me, when I'm in that space, I'm just like you said, it's like I'm just spiraling. So and then I get in that dark place, and then it's like, so you don't ever think to stop. And I remember growing up, my mom, when I would have panic attacks, would always be like, Kelsey, lay on the floor, breathe. And now it's all just kind of clicking, and that would always help me. It's like, if you can stop and remember just to breathe, and then like you said, move it out of your body, like laugh, put on a funny song. I think that that's really helpful. And now I'm going to remember that every time. So thank you.
Yeah. And your mom was really on point with that. Lay on the floor. I mean, that's what I tell my 4-year-old. Lay on the floor, roll around.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's in the beginning, as you're starting to evolve and grow and ascend, it's hard, right? It's no different than if you're on a diet and you're trying to lose weight. In the beginning, it's hard. But I just have watched in my journey, if you're focused, you can start applying things, and then they get a little easier and a little easier, and then they become habits. Just like our bad habits become habits, the good habits can really start to connect for you. And you have to, do things that are going to help you remember. Like even yesterday, I realized recently that I forgot some of my AM and PM practices. So I made little colorful index cards. I put them on the mantle where I say my prayers every night. And now I remember every night that I want to make sure I do my gratitude list, make sure I ask myself, what did I do that was loving to me today? What did I do that was not so loving to me? Like taking stock of the day, celebrating the wins. And so I'm like, okay, how do I stay on track? Okay, I got to write it down somewhere. I'm going to see it. And that will help. So I think that, Kelsey, for you, if you're trying to figure out how to handle the lows, it's writing down some of the steps Dr. Nita said, put it on your fridge, put it somewhere, and then just start training yourself to go there when you are sad. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to play the dinosaur song because I got to shake it out, get it out of my body. Now you're feeling a little better. okay, now you can start to ask yourself the questions that she's asking, and finding that magic in the mess, and figuring out how to climb out of it all. But, all of these things take a little bit of work, but it does work in the end. It's just new habits you have to create.
And I think also being gentle in the process, because if we're judging ourselves and like, oh, okay, this is a new habit that I want to create, then we kind of fall on our like, oh my gosh, I was supposed to do this, but then I didn't. Instead of just having the intention of, okay, yep, I have my journal and I have my favorite pen and I have my little candle. And when I'm having these really big, tough moments, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to light a candle. And it could just start with a small, tiny ritual, just like that, lighting a candle, or, drawing in my journal, or saying whatever words come up. I love that you use your mantle at the end of the day. And it's one of the reasons why I think I might have sent you guys the that suck now what, the affirmation cards, but it's one of the reasons why we created them, is because, okay, there's a sucky moment that can happen, but it's just even a reminder to turn it around. And there's like one tiny little action step. And it's great because that's just kind of a loving way to like honor yourself. Because when we're starting something new many times, and we want to create a habit of journaling, or a habit of gratitude lists, or a habit of just our wind down time before we go to bed, it can be exhausting, but we're beating ourselves up if we miss a day or two, or if we miss a day of our gratitude. And then we think, oh, we can't get back. But what if we just reframed it and said, tomorrow I'm going to start again. Tomorrow I'm going to start again. Tomorrow is going to be that now what part. All right, tomorrow's now what. And now what's going to consist of, here's where it is. Because when we keep it so big that it has to be a certain way, that imposes restrictions. That means that we can only do it that way. And if we fall off track, or we're just having a bad day or a bad season or a bad month, that it doesn't mean that, game off. We could actually get back on the train again and reintroduce things that, what I like to say is, it's nourishing for the season. And you can give yourself permission to choose to do those things, or opt out of it and do something else. But I think the intention is there. And when we have the intention, that's where organically those habits start to take place.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point for everyone, because no matter how hard we try, we are going to fall off the wagon, or whatever someone wants to say, or just, have a busier season, and some of those things kind of fall to the wayside, but you can always find your way back. And
yeah, giving yourself permission to find your way back. I think that's the big thing too, right? It's like, it might not be every day, but maybe at the end of the year, when you look back, we just did a reflection exercise, and we usually do this at the end of each year to see the three things that worked well, or highlight points of every month, and to actually write it down. And then you're looking back and you're like, well, actually, oh, okay. That conversation that I had with my brother in July, that actually helped me have another conversation with my coworker in November. And that added to my bravery. And so when we're doing that audit at the end of the year, or 6 months, or, at the end of each quarter, we can actually see how much we've grown. And you never know, you're probably like, oh yeah, I actually kept up with my meditation practice 6 months out of the year. That's actually pretty good average, right? And so it's small steps, and like the increments of our growth and expansion, if we're not tied to an actual, like, I'm going to wake up every day at 5 a.m. and do this thing, because chances are we're just not going to do that. We're human.
I know. I want to actually we do this little like 5-minute show called Monday Motivations and Intentions. I want to get kind of your daily process for that. But first, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today. The book is called That Sucked, Now What? We'll put links to everything in the summary of this episode. And hopefully this is the first of many conversations.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Maria, I loved it so much. And Kelsey, you too. You're such a queen. Loved that.
Learn
Yes,
from the
she
best.
is.
Learn from the best. Thank you.
You really are. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. That was
Um,
such a beautiful convo.
All right. That was an amazing conversation. I loved hearing her share her story and kind of how she climbs out of challenges, because I think we all need that. Kelsey, I know that she gave you some tips that I don't know. Are you
I
feeling
love them.
hopeful?
Yeah, very hopeful. I think one of the hardest things I know for me is to actually sit in my feelings. It goes back to what you guys were talking about like being the strong one and big girls don't cry. And I never felt my feelings and I have a lot of feelings. And so I think that like exactly what she was saying, like sitting in the stuck and the suck both, but then like kind of being there with yourself and taking care of yourself. Like that's something that I can consciously do and I absolutely will do next time. And it's not hard. It's like, it might be hard the
It's
first
hard.
time
No, it's
to
hard.
get into it. Yeah. But I think I don't know why for me that felt easier to do than some of the other stuff. I was like, oh, I can sit there with myself and, love on myself and throw on some music. But yeah, it really helped me. And I liked it a lot.
Everyone do the dinosaur dance. Or get the Paddington Bear 2 song. I love it.
There you go.
So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us on this healing journey every day. If you're listening, thank you for being with us. We love all of you, and we're so grateful for you guys being a part of this Heal Squad. In the meantime, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.